Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of The Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, host also of RT's talk show, Crosstalk. Well, we're at it again, Peter. There's a high-level meeting taking place today between the Deputy Secretary of State and China's Vice Foreign Minister. And this time, it's taking place on Chinese soil. Previously, it took place in Anchorage, Alaska, but now it's taking place on Chinese soil. And from the early indications, I mean, it's already quite a fraught affair. The Vice Foreign Minister, Feng, I'm just reading out from Associated Press report, accused the administration of Vice President Joe Biden of trying to contain and suppress China's development. The fundamental reason why relations between the two face serious difficulties is because some Americans portray China as a, quote, imagined enemy, unquote. The Chinese then issued a series of demands. Yeah, they said that China delivered a long list of demands, including withdrawal of visa restrictions on Chinese Communist Party members and their families, sanctions on Chinese leaders, officials, and government departments, and lifting visa restrictions on Chinese students. Now, it's when you get to these meetings with China, you always have to keep in mind that there are two things can be true at once. Now, it's the Chinese have legitimate grounds for complaining when the United States presumes to lecture the Chinese, presumes to interfere in internal Chinese affairs, tells China how to run Hong Kong, or what it should and should not do with regard to Taiwan or Xinjiang or Tibet and so on. China is not, however, in the right when it just dismisses all talk of investigation of the origins of COVID, which again came up with the Chinese Vice Foreign Minister, because that's a serious matter, and the United States stands with most of the rest of the world on wanting to get to the bottom of the origins of COVID. And as for these visa restrictions, well, it may well be that these people are engaged in espionage. I'm quite sure that they are not all innocent students coming to the United States, eager to learn and burnish their credentials and their knowledge. They may well be involved in espionage. Now, maybe there's very little one can do about it, but nonetheless, one can understand that there are legitimate U.S. interests to protecting its trade secrets, its intellectual property, and they may not want a whole bunch of students engaging in espionage on highly secret research done in Stanford or Harvard or whatever. So my feeling is always one has to take a balanced view and not do what I think some on the left do, which is to say, well, the Chinese are all innocent and everything. It's all jolly unfair the way everyone keeps accusing them of all these terrible things. So anyway, Peter, what's your take?
Well, China's a great power and it's behaving like one. Okay, everybody? Yeah. And also, personally, I think that the American delegation is getting a taste of their own medicine. This is what they do to countries all over the world. So get used to it. Get used to it. Get used to something you haven't done for a long time. Sit down and negotiate the nitty gritty and understand that neither side is going to get everything they want. That's how it works. For me, it's a reality check. Okay, finally. Okay, because yes, China is challenging American hegemony by its very existence. It challenges American hegemony. The Americans don't take well to that. They're not used to it. Okay, so I hope, at least for the American delegation, it's a learning experience. It's like, this is going to be a long trek. This is not going to be easy. And there's no reason in the world why the Chinese should make it easy. You're absolutely right. I mean, do major powers spy on each other? Of course they do. They do it 24/7, every single day of the year. So get used to it And I'm really tired of the a lot of American conservatives, saying, America's a victim in all of this. No, put on your big boy pants and get in on the international stage and deal with it from a position of strength, because expect your interlocutor to do exactly the same thing. Well, I mean, I don't know what all of the heat noise is all about here. Okay, this is the way it should be.
Well, no, I think that's right, but I think that you then have to take the corollary of that, which is that there is basically nothing wrong with the United States imposing visa restrictions on China's students and saying that we're not very happy about thousands of Chinese students invading all our science and engineering.
That's an American internal affair.
Right.
So butt out.
Right.
Okay, it's not, you don't have it. You don't have a right to an American visa. You don't. It's a privilege. Okay, I've never faulted the U.S. when it comes to something like that. I have faulted major Republican senators. I think you know who I'm talking about. Oh, we want a waiver for this group and this group. Okay, because there's some kind of lobbying going on there, okay, which means there's probably an envelope involved metaphorically somehow, okay? That's what irritates me. I agree. Have a rule.
And I think it's a very good point that even in the Trump era, Trump was happily saying that, hey, well, we've got all these science and engineering students from abroad. Why don't we immediately give them a green card as soon as they've completed their studies and get them a nice path to citizenship? So that was Trump himself. It's like, hey, we're going to get the best and the brightest from all over the world. Yeah, so you're now going to get all these Chinese students. You're going to give them a green card, a passage to citizenship, while they're probably spying for the Chinese government. Nice. They're going to be spying for the Chinese government and enjoy the privilege of American citizenship. So, I mean, it was a nutty idea. But I think that's, that, as you say, it is a part of great power rivalry. And where the United States fails very badly is by talking about something that really doesn't concern the United States. I mean, what happens inside China is of no business of the United States. And I think here, where China starts talking about, stop all this talk about origins of COVID, China's in the wrong. And then, and again, when China says, hey, lift all these visa restrictions, again, the hell with that. So I think that it's very important that there should be clear gradations or distinctions drawn between all of these issues, and not make it a whole sort of good versus evil struggle on both sides. I think
on both sides.
On the Ted Cruz's who think China is the sort of embodiment of evil, and as well as people both on the left and among some of the anti-war.com non-interventionists, which is that, China is just a completely innocent party and it's just being injured by these terrible Americans. So I think you've got to get away from both extremes.
What I think we found from the reports I've read, and obviously the postmortem of the Anchorage summit, which was complete failure, is that bully to bully ain't going to work. Yeah. And you're going to have to find a much more nuanced way. Absolutely find a more nuanced way. And like I said, really stress, you're going to have to accept you're not going to get everything you want. And my instinct is the Chinese know that, okay? And that's why they're putting on this show of quote unquote strength, okay? Because they didn't take kindly to the statement that, Wendy Sherman, she's going there from a position of strength. Well, I mean, that's nice kind of internal, attaboy stuff. It's the usual stuff from these people. But if that's the kind, it's projecting to the Chinese, we're showing up with an attitude. Well, they're going to say, well, you're on our turf. We'll show you what attitude is. See, we need to get away from that. China is not Panama. Okay. And is China going to look for every single possible advantage it can? Of course it is. Get used to it. Right. And that's why I think that, hopefully, there's going to be at least a coming to terms of that this is going to be tough, but if there's goodwill on both parts, we can avoid conflict in some areas and actually have some cooperation in others. Okay, that's a very cold, sobering thing. Look at George. Think back in the early 60s when arms controlled the Soviet Union. You know, that was a tough slog. It was hard work to come to an understanding how we don't like each other, we hate each other, we're opposed to each other. But this is one area is just so very important for all of humanity. Right. We have to come to an understanding.
Right.
And I would really like to have that kind of mindset again. We don't see, this is what I always say to people. Russia and the United States, United States and China, they don't have to be friends. They don't have to be friends. They should not be enemies. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I think that's a good point. The drawback here is that China is challenging in the United States in a way that the United States have never been challenged before. And that, I think, is causing great distress increasingly. I mean, this is something that's only emerged during the past 5 years, that American economic dominance is being challenged by China. Now, you know, as history has shown, great powers don't take kindly to being supplanted by emerging powers. So I think that's why I think it will be quite difficult, more difficult than I think what happened during the Cold War. And let's remember, even during the Cold War, that was just a brief phase of the sort of the arms control era between the sort of the hostilities of the 1950s and 60s, and the renewed hostilities from the late 1970s on until the emergence of Gorbachev. So that was just an interregnum between the hostile periods. But the Soviet Union never posed that kind of a threat to the United States global hegemony in the way that China does, and that's why this may be a little bit rockier, kind of a bumpier passage.
Yeah, I'll go even further, I'll widen the landscape here. This is the first time in 500 years a non-Western power is making a bid to be at least a co-hegemon, if that's even a term or a concept. And it's something that is really quite bewildering and puzzling. And also it ties in, again, we go back to these crazy liberals, these neoliberals with their tolerance and their diversity and all that. And, you know, it all seems to work all nice and fine, but then when it's on the international stage, the Chinese are challenging us, not challenging the United States, but the Western world and Western civilization. And the Chinese have a lot of advantages because so many of our leaders, thought leaders, influencers in the West despise the West. So the Chinese already have a one-up on that. But I get your point, the Thucydides trap. Okay, yeah. So what should we take away from it at this point? How do we avoid conflict? Okay, I think that's what we need. I mean, and I worry so much is that I think it was in the last few days, they need like $250 billion more to take on China. I think you probably came across it. They're always doing it here. But I'm very wary and I'm very worried that if you're going to think that the military is your solution, then you're sorely wrong, because this isn't Cold War 1.0. There are a lot of other very important variables involved. And what the US is doing, which I think is a mistake, is asking the world to make a either or choice. And I think that that's not a wise move when it comes to a country that has approximately the same economic weight in the world as the United States. I mean, the Soviet Union never was in that realm, never remotely in that realm. There was autarky, they didn't trade, okay? Right. So, you know, this is very, very different. And I really worry that, you know, you have these, you know, these Mark Millies around. I mean, are you going to trust these people? I don't, okay? So I think, you know, for me, the summit, it should be the beginning of something to say, look, you know, taking a bullying position stance isn't going to get you anywhere from both sides, okay? And so we'll see where it goes, but this is a long slog. It's a long one.
No, I think that's I think right. I think it's really important to define what will be American interest. Now, I've thought that it's clear that the overwhelming American interest is to grasp for itself its role, restore for itself its role of the major manufacturing power in the world. I think that is the goal. And I think Trump was absolutely right on that issue. I think it has to then move away from its economic reliance on China, and therefore there'll be all these trade negotiations will be quite fraught. And again, it has to decide what does he want to do. I mean, does he want to be the major, the great economic industrial power that he was before World War II and in the immediate aftermath of World War II, or does he want to go down the path of AOC, Kamala Harris, wokeism? You can't really have both.
No,
either
you can't.
you're going to be you want to go back to your number one in the world, or you want to just go off in this self-indulgent wokeism. I think it's a big cultural decision the United States is going to have to make.
I think the elites have already made that decision, George. I think that horse is bolted. I mean, and we've had this discussion before. What it would take for the United States to reindustrialize, it is so monumental, it's hard to even comprehend. And add to it, we have elites that are not interested in it. Not to sound like a broken record, but to say it very quickly, globalization was understood and practiced in different ways in Beijing and in Washington. Washington, it was financialization. In the Chinese, it was industrialization. The Chinese made the better choice, okay? Because, and again, not to sound like a broken record, the way the U.S. abuses sanctions and the U.S. dollar, it constantly is weakening its position. It's all self-inflicted here. And again, to stress, if they think there's a military solution to all of this, they're grossly wrong. Look at how many exercises there've been, these mock exercises over Taiwan. They had to change the rule. They had to give the American side weapons that didn't even exist yet to even get a draw, okay? So, I mean, that's why Miss Sherman, I've come across her name before, and I never felt very impressive about her. This is good. This is a gambit that is going to be very, very complicated. And the more this model in the U.S. continues down its rosy path, the fewer and fewer tools are in the toolbox, in my opinion.
Right. Well, as I say, I think one has to distinguish then between when you get the lectures, all of those lectures, the human rights lectures, the Hong Kong lectures, the Taiwan lectures, from those issues on which the United States has legitimate interest, and in which basically they're absolutely right to confront China on. So I think you got to be careful not to fall into the trap of just saying, okay, whatever the Chinese doing is fine. So I think as I say,
right.
I'm not saying you, but I'm just saying that it's a kind of an intellectual danger that there is. So on the issue of manufacturing, making America an industrial superpower, I think it's right that America should be pursuing that. On the issue of COVID, that there has to be some kind of an accounting for this pandemic. I think the United States is right. On the rest, messing around with Tibet and Hong Kong, I think it's just America's out of line and just dissipating its resources and on a losing argument.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, I don't want to sound trite and certainly not ideological here. The best way for the U.S. to confront China is for the U.S. to get its house in order.
Right.
I'm sorry. I really strongly feel that way. Because roaming the world searching for monsters to slay. This is the mentality that we're getting out of the establishment, and sometimes I just don't even really think it's even real. I mean, again, I have that cynical streak in me, and so said, it's just to please Raytheon. I mean, like I've said many times, if you look at the whole Korean Peninsula thing, I mean. at the end of the day, how many people really want to resolve the Korean issue? Because there's just, the trough is there. There's just, I mean, the Korean Peninsula is a huge military layout every single year. Who wants to get rid of that? Well, look how they fought tooth and nail not to leave Afghanistan. You have to think of this element too, because the ruling class is so plugged in to the military industrial complex, and that's just a nice arrangement that nobody really wants to disturb as the world is dramatically changing.
Right. Well, I think it's I think it's a little more than that. I mean, I think it is a question of the U.S. elites, which they've been denying it for a number of years. U.S. elites not liking United States hegemony in the world being challenged, and they see China's challenge. It's taken a long time for them to realize that what's happening. I remember during the Obama years. No, they discounted the challenge of China. Then during the Trump years, we had the whole elites obsessing about Russia and the horrific threat we face from Putin and the Russians. And that's still a very powerful dominant thought. Now, there are clearly people within the Biden team who have kind of cottoned on to, well, China is actually a big issue. Look, it takes a long time for people to grasp things. I mean, we're talking about, history, we're talking about 50-year span, 100-year spans. I mean, things don't get settled within 20, 30 years. There is now a paradigm shift, to use that pretentious phrase, a paradigm shift. That's something.
I like that phrase.
yeah. It's kind of a word from way back. And suddenly thinking, I mean, there's something going on here, which we hadn't really thought about. We were still stuck in that whole, Cold War mindset. China's a great guy. It's our little junior ally against the horrible Soviet Union. So, it's taking time, but there's a kind of, I think the U.S. policymaking elite is sort of grasping that there's a new way of thinking. There's a new way of thinking about the world is necessary.
And it's still too early to make any kind of judgment call. But our gut feeling after the Biden-Putin summit, I think is playing out, because personally, I think the message was, we draw a line here. Relations are certainly not going to get better, but let's try to avoid making them worse. Okay, I think that's in play. I'll probably be relieved of this supposition very rudely very soon, but I think it's in play. I think you're right. It's just that there's just so many moving pieces that you have to say. I mean, FDR was, during the Depression, during the Second World War, he basically said he bribed business, into manufacturing, okay, and threatened them and all kinds of things. So we don't have that kind of political will like in the White House, for example, okay, because they're all captured by these American oligarchs and monopolies. And so we need an FDR type figure to say, look, this is staring us in the face. Okay, and you want to squabble about transgender toilets right now, okay? Right. Unfortunately, I don't see that catalyst coming about. But no. At least we'll agree on one point. I think they're beginning to realize is that, we've really been missing the ball for the last 30 years.
Right. Well, I think that's it, and I think that's where we are now. I mean, which way do you want to go? You want to be serious? Want to be a great power? Retain your position? Take on this, this challenge, have the economic strength and the industrial power that you once had to be able to take this challenge on, or do you want to go down the whole woke culture, obsessing about racism, obsessing about the American Civil War and white nationalism, white supremacy? You can do that. You can indulge yourself and then just fade into irrelevance. And it could be that. Well, yeah. The Biden administration seems to be bifurcated. There are people there who seem to want to do this seriously, like the current U.S. trade representative. Her name escapes me right now. She sounds like a Trumpian. And you've got the Kamala Harris types. So who knows which way that's going to go.
At the end of the day, what defines a great power? A great power is a manufacturer that makes things the world wants. That is probably the easiest and most straightforward definition of a great power. It's not your military. It's stuff if people want it and you can export it and make money from it. Okay. Okay. All right, everybody. We're going to keep an eye. Of course, this is the long slog, George, and I'm going to be watching every step of it here. You can find us on Local, so go to thegaggle.locals.com. We are doing a series of Zoom interviews with gagglers, which is really interesting. We have the Gaggle store up and running, and stay tuned. Very soon, we're going to have our first Q&A out, and there's something about a jar, George.
There's also a tip jar for and for which is open for contributors. So if you want to feel generous, dip into your pocket, that jar is open, and welcomes, and warmly welcomes any contribution.
And pick it up and pass it around.
Exactly. So we don't have Rupert Murdoch dipping into his pocket and putting in $5 bills or any kind of bills into it. So we would appreciate any help, because the more you can help us, the better the product. And remember, if you like the Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.